Good afternoon, everyone. You are joining us for our fourth call of Volunteer Appreciation Week here through American Pets Alive. Today we're being joined by Rachel and Christy from Pima Animal Care Center, where they've really embraced volunteers into their life-saving philosophies and programming. And so they're going to share with us some of the great things that they're doing and how other organizations can integrate volunteers as well. So I'm going to pass it off here to Rachel in her fancy suit and tie.
Fancy, I dressed up just for you guys. Okay.
And to Christy, and let you guys have at it. So take it away.
Awesome. Well, I am Rachel, the Urgent Dog Case Manager at PACC, which means I get to play with our bratty dogs and work with our volunteers to create outcome pathways for them. We are joined by long-stay volunteer Christy, who has been championing our harder to place dogs for what, like 8 years now?
Something like that.
A very long time. And she's personally seen PET go through a lot of organizational changes over that time and seen how new developments have affected our dog population and outcomes. So I'm going to kick it over to Christy for a while.
Hello. Yes, nice to meet you all. And as Rachel says, I have been volunteering for quite a few years. We're going to talk, we're kind of going to touch on our volunteer programs. They probably look a lot like many of yours if you have open admissions or larger shelters. I think we've become pretty progressive in the years that I've been volunteering there. As you can see from this slide, that was what the shelter looked like when I first got to PACC and started walking dogs. I think there was maybe 3 days a week we could go and walk dogs, and there was no safety system or color coding or anything. So lots of scary things happened, lots of euthanasia happened. A few years ago, we got a grant, help me out here, Rachel.
A grant?
No, it was
Bond?
a new shelter, a bond, thank you. A $22 million bond to build a new shelter, which was really cool because the community voted for it. And now you can see in that below picture what our new shelter looks like. So it's a much nicer, more welcoming place for pets to go, but it's also, I think the mentality of how we deal with animal sheltering has changed. So we're not going to go into that in too much detail because we really want to get to the good stuff about the urgent dogs, but we'll touch on some of these slides fairly quickly. PACC brings in about 18,000 pets per year. Like most open admissions shelters, probably fairly lean on staffing. So a lot of the staff does a lot of work with few employees. There's about 100 employees. I think that includes our officers. We have about 150 active volunteers and probably a couple hundred not very active volunteers. That changed a lot with COVID. We lost a lot of people and we're sort of slowly working on easing that back into play, getting more people to come back. You can see our save rate over the last few years, or over back to 2012 is actually when I started volunteering. So the save rate was only 46%. Yeah, it was a rough days. You just come in and some of your favorite animals would not be there the next day. And then over the years, we progressed up to this year, we're at a 92%. So we really euthanize very few animals and even dogs that are, have histories of killing other animals or aggression or, just colored histories. We work really hard to place them into safe places and homes so that we can achieve that save rate, but it's not easy. That's why we have this program. And you can see too from our foster numbers. Rachel, do you want to touch on that since you know all about foster?
Yeah, fosters played a large part in a lot of PACC's life-saving efforts. I think we peaked in 2019, and then in 2020 during COVID, our numbers went down a little because we started doing a lot of kitten diversion. But I think more adult dogs than ever went out to foster in 2020, actually.
So that's a quick history of our shelter, and we'll touch on some of our volunteer programs. We're really going to focus on dogs today, because dogs.
Perfect.
Yeah. So, you know, our biggest program is dog walking, but we do a lot of other things. As you can see, we play and canoodle with dogs as well. We do have a bunch of different programs, which we'll talk about briefly. Let's see here. Basically, we believe that, you know, those of us that have been around a long time believe that every dog getting out of their kennel every day is critical. We actually have had a really strong dog walking program where every available dog, so that means dogs available for adoption, get out of their kennel every morning without fail, and some of them get out in the evening as well. Smaller program in the evening, but we do our best, and I think it really keeps the dogs a lot more sane than some of the shelters that just aren't able to do that. We have anywhere from 120 dogs to walk right now, and we've been up to 250 a day, and we still get them out, and it's rough, but we believe in it. So let's see. We also do some play groups. At least we were doing play groups really strongly until we got hit by COVID, and some of our staff had to be, you know, put onto different shifts, and it just wasn't feasible. But play group is obviously a great program for helping to keep our dogs sane, to let them play, to evaluate how they will do in a home with other animals, and all that kind of stuff. Currently, we are just doing play groups for evaluations of new animals. So our rock stars will go into the play group and we'll evaluate the new animals. But we're really anxious to get back to a situation where we can do more regular play groups, because especially for our urgent dogs, some of them really need that extra socialization time and the information we get from it and all the other good stuff. It's currently staff run. We have had some volunteers who have helped with play groups, including myself, but it's just tough to stretch. We're also doing a lot of other things, so it's mostly staff run. Field trips and sleepovers, that's one of my favorites. One of my favorite things to do is every Sunday we take one of our longest stay dogs to lunch, which is always a challenge because there's different dogs with different behavior issues, so you have to create an environment for them. But we learned so much about them by taking them out of the shelter. And I know that some shelters are still a little bit hesitant, especially with dogs that have some behavior issues. But it's really critical. We learn a lot about them. You can see this dog in the picture on the bottom. You know, he was a giant dog with behavior issues, and you know, he was afraid to get in the vehicle. And so it helps us to learn, what are we going to face when someone does kind of come and adopt them? Are we going to have issues getting them in the car? Are we going to, you know, so we can desensitize them and work with them and teach them all that fun stuff. And we can get some great marketing material. This dog giving a kiss in the picture has some pretty weird notes from home. And we learned a lot about her by taking her out, and that she was really not, at least in public, at least in our experience, is as bad as her notes. And that happens a lot. And sometimes those notes are perfectly valid, and sometimes they're a mystery. But it's important that we can get our information and experience and add those notes and find out more about those animals.
And I just want to say, with Oreo, we used Christy's write-up and the pictures they took from this outing to schedule her a Facebook post, and we're currently talking to a few interested adopters just based on that outing, and making sure to use that and make sure the public sees it.
And
Christy,
she also,
how many dogs do you think you've taken on day trips? Could you even estimate? Because you're like the hero rock star of doggy day trips.
Yeah, my office is really close, and I used to be able to take dogs to my office all the time. I don't know, maybe 100, probably. I mean, we didn't do day passes until, you know, in the first few years, we really just didn't do a lot of that, but more and more we have. I did want to mention that we assign dogs dot colors. So like by level of difficulty for handling. It's really important that people who are trained and able to handle a dog in specific behaviors are handling the dogs of that level and not other, you know, more difficult dogs. So when you take a dog on a day pass, you're taking a dog that you have earned that level. So that's really important, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, but it's really critical for the safety of it. I just watched like the incidents and bites and all those kinds of things go down over the years as we have more and more structure in place. And one last thing to do with day passes, office dogs, just don't underestimate bringing a dog into your office. If you've got a space in your shelter where you can just let a dog sleep for 4 hours, or let them hang out with you. And it's like we have a volunteer office and people are in and out of there. And so many of our office dogs get adopted because they're getting more marketing, they're getting more love. All of a sudden the staff's coming in and they get to know the dog more. And so if you have a space like that, use it, even if it's just for short periods of time. We find a lot of naughty dogs who can't manage overnight in the office, but bring them in for a couple hours. So, okay, enrichment. We do have a very loose enrichment program. We try to get the dogs that are in rabies observation and can't leave their kennel, as well as our long stay dogs. So we have probably 3 or 4 days a week that we get enrichment to those animals. Again, our dogs that can get out of the kennels every day do. So enrichment is important, but not as critical for the dogs that are getting out of the kennels. But it is something I'd like to see more focus on going forward as we kind of get our volunteer staff up again after COVID, once we're all vaccinated. It's also a jumpstart activity. We have what we call jumpstart activities now for volunteers that are onboarding, who are not yet fully trained, haven't gone through the dog handling or haven't been mentored. We have a bunch of things they can do, like clean poop stations and sanitize areas in the shelter, and make enrichment. So it's a good activity for them. And if they get to hand it out, then they kind of get to know the dogs a little bit too. So
Plus, it's way more fun than just cleaning.
definitely. Yeah, the biggest challenge we have is people show up and say, hey, I'm here for my jumpstart activity. I signed up for enrichment, and there's not really anyone there to train them to do it. And enrichment's one of those things like, let's see, what do we have in the cupboard today? So we just jump in and try to help where we can and give people guidance and hope that it sticks for some people. Okay, we have another cool program and they are going to be presenting tomorrow, so I won't talk too much about it, but Top Dogs is a volunteer run program where they help teach other volunteers to train shelter dogs. So they do periodic classes where you pick a dog and you take them to class and you do it for 6 or 8 weeks. Clicker training. They do, I just call it like a drive-by. They set up in the park during walking hours. And when we're walking dogs, if you want to stop by and learn a new skill, you can do that. And they also provide some really great post-adoption or foster support for dogs and their families with behavioral issues. So things that would normally send the dog back to the shelter potentially, they're trying to assist so that people can hold on to their foster or to their adopted dog.
And they were so helpful to me when I was a dog foster coordinator. Just having that Top Dogs helpline, because I think all 4 of them are certified, or the last one's about to be, but they're all like certified trainers at this point that kind of took it up as a hobby and saw a need and filled that hole. And as a dog foster coordinator, I would have fosters texting, messaging, emailing me at every hour, asking me for behavior help. And like, I learned a lot about behavior because I was kind of forced to in that setting. But having Top Dogs there as backup was huge for me and huge for foster satisfaction in taking these dogs home, because invariably stuff's going to come up. And Top Dogs has been such a lifeline for both me and our fosters.
all of these could, could be good presentations.
Mhm.
Decompression Program is another one I thought I should mention. This is a program that was started by a couple of volunteers, and one in particular who really had a soft spot for the fearful dogs. A lot of dogs that were coming to us that were, essentially feral, hoarding case dogs. Basically, back in those days, they were just being euthanized because they could not be handled and they could not be evaluated. And she just said, look, give me 2 weeks with this dog, please just give me 2 weeks. And so what they started to learn skills on how to teach these are dogs who are shut down, who are shelter shocked, who are unsocialized, don't know how to walk on a leash, you name it. There's different flavors of them, but so they have special techniques they use to work with them on learning how to walk on a leash, learning how to handle touch, learning how to trust humans. Sometimes it takes a few days and those dogs bounce out of that shell, and then sometimes it takes a lot longer. But it's really a cool program. They work with them as long as necessary until they can be evaluated by staff, and at that point they ask for an evaluation and the dog can graduate out of the program. There's still a lot of challenges as far as these dogs, getting them into homes that are suitable and patient. We do tend to lose a lot of them. They get away from their adopters, and so it's a challenging program to be part of, but it's saved a lot of animals, and there's some special people in that program. So I wanted to mention it. And then the next one, I'm not going to talk too much about because that's what we're going to talk about for most of this. But Finn's Fund is our urgent dog task force. The word urgent used to be like, oh my God, I'm going to have a heart attack, because, when you hear that a dog is going urgent, that usually means that a deadline is coming and bad things are going to happen. We've really morphed over the years to that being a bad thing, to saying, okay, this dog is declining, needs some special attention. And so that's what the Urgent Dog Task Force started out as. And that attention, we're focusing on the highest risk dogs that are declining, that need extra attention, training, marketing, you name it. And we'll talk about that in more detail in a minute. About retention and training programs. So I'm sure you have all experienced the difficulty with retaining volunteers. It's not easy work, especially in a busy open admission shelter. It's really stressful to come in every day. It's stressful to go home at night and leaving those dogs in their kennels and knowing that, they're going to spend another night there. It's hard on a lot of people, and I don't think it's what they were expecting to come in and walk some cute little fuzzy dogs. So it's hard. And there's always a core group that is right on the verge of burnout and, trying to get more volunteers and to get them to stay. So I think the things that we have done that have helped to retain volunteers is to really be upfront and honest about what it's like to volunteer in the shelter, provide solid training opportunities. So we actually, with COVID, we had to go to some online training, but that's been that's actually worked pretty well for us. And then once they performed the online training for whatever the target area, and that could be, dogs, it could be cats, it could be clinic, once you've had, some experience in the shelter handling animals. And then you work with a mentor, and that has been probably our biggest help for new volunteers as far as the feedback that we get from them. They feel like they're alone. They finish their training and now all of a sudden they're thrown to the wolves. So the mentoring and shadowing of other volunteers is really critical in retaining people. And as I mentioned, we've got the Jumpstart program. So while they're waiting to get into their training or their mentoring, they can clean out poop stations or make enrichment. So we do have hundreds of volunteers. We had like up to 500 at one point. I don't know how many of those people were actually, actively coming in or out, but over the years, we have really done a lot to commit to adequate management for those people. It's hard to manage, hundreds of people if you don't really have a manager. So we do, we're lucky enough to have a volunteer coordinator and a volunteer manager. And these lovely ladies in the picture, we actually just lost one of them to moving back to her home state, sadly. And then they also have administrative volunteers that assist them. So I think it's important to commit to that, leadership if you can in your volunteer program. All right, dog handling. One of the most important things we did to improve our dog handling program is to assign colored dots. And you can see that's one of our walker boards. We have currently have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. About 5 walker boards, so different areas of the shelter. And all of those animals have to be evaluated by our behavior team before volunteers handle them, which has been really a game changer. Our behavior team is excellent. They evaluate, not only with other animals, but they, make excellent notes about how is the dog when they brought him out of the kennel. Was there kennel fighting? Was there fearfulness? Was the dog head shy? All of those notes get added into our shelter software, and we can review them before we take out an animal. So easiest is green. There's not even any green dots on there. Then we have blue, and then we have pink, and then we have orange. And the orange dots there's more of a bite risk with orange dogs. They usually have like some type of behavior or handling issue. Reactivity very strong. They might need special equipment. And so all of that stuff is assigned by the behavior team. So if they know that a dog is a leash biter, they're going to supply a chain leash and require that we use a chain leash with that dog. This dog in the picture is an awesome dog. He's like the best dog in the world.
Zeus?
Yeah, Zeus the 4th, I think.
Yeah.
We have a lot of Zeus, so we give them numbers.
So many
He had some reactivity in the shelter the first time he was with us. And so we use a hood so that he can not get reactive as much on the way out. And that works for some dogs. But anyway, all of that stuff is assigned by our behavior team. And as volunteers, if we see something, change in behavior, either good or bad, we can also add, request for the dog to change color dots or for special equipment. The dog on the right is deaf. His name is Wedo, and he likes to carry a toy during his walk because when he sees other dogs, he reacts and bites the leash, etc. But he has a toy, so he doesn't do that. So a lot of just subtle things, and where you locate the dog in the shelter. If it's a dog that's very reactive, you want to put him close to an exit so you can get him in and out easier. We also have meds for our dogs, stress meds. We assign give them trazodone or Prozac in some cases. So we can always request for them to be evaluated for meds. And all of those things are really important for us. We also have access to Chameleon, which is our shelter software. Volunteers did not always have access to the software. It was really a game changer for us. Now we can review all the notes, we can mark it, we can add our own behavior notes, handling notes, field trip notes. We can upload pictures, we can upload videos now, which is really super cool. And even the worst selfie in the world is like better than not having a video or a picture or, extra information up there. We also try to write bios, even if they're, we look at the notes, we see, the information that we have for that animal and try to come up with something short and clever so that when people are looking on Pet Harbor, they have something, they know right away that dog is not good with cats or that kind has lived with kids, anything we can get that we know about that animal, we try to include so that there is something. So notes. And then really I think this was the last thing I wanted to talk about was the STR process. So we never use the word E-list or, a deadline. I guess we use the word deadline, but we came up with a term called short-term rescue, STR. And it's essentially the equivalent of an E-list. When a dog becomes urgent to the point where he's going to be euthanized, we get notified. There's an opt-in email group where if you want to be notified, you'll get notified of an animal that gets put on a deadline. They get 7 days to start, and all of the behavior and medical notes are sent to us, including like the bite reports and the pictures of the dead goats or whatever, you know, whatever this animal's got himself into. And then we have time to review those notes, work with that animal, work with that dog, and try to find life-saving options, market them, add our notes for our own experiences handling the dog. And it just gives us a chance to try to find a suitable placement for the dog. You know, one of the things is we have found some great placements for some of these dogs that have questionable paths or just poor in-shelter handling, or you name it. And there's also, you know, there's also heartbreak. You know, we send them out to where we think they might be a good, suitable home, and they, you know, they really do have a behavior that's persisting, or we just can't find a placement for them. So it's tough work, but it, you know, over the years, it's really evolved. It is probably the biggest point of contention between staff and volunteers, because, you know, it's a lot of pressure on volunteers to try to find life-saving options for these animals. You know, we just can't, everyone wants more extensions and wants, you know, a second chance, or third chance or fifth chance. But the reality is we're not, you know, a rehabilitation center. We have over 100 dogs, you know, animals coming in every single day. So we can't house these dogs long-term, but it's kind of a cool program that has evolved and is saving a lot of lives. And it really is heavily integrated into Fins Fund. And it's another reason why we have Fins Fund, is to try to stop the dogs from getting onto this list and getting into the situation where they're in trouble. With that, we'll move on to Fins Fund.
And I just want to say, I know it's so much stress for volunteers, but it has been, I mean, it's been completely priceless having that level of transparency. I know there's a lot of shelters that just kind of want to, like, in the back end secret, euthanize these dogs without telling anyone because they're afraid of the blow up from that. But giving volunteers access to this information has saved so many dogs, and through their marketing efforts, the majority of the time our behavior dogs on deadlines find placement. And that has just been absolutely priceless. So with that, we'll talk about Fins Fund a little bit. Let me pull up some notes. I got to move into the role of urgent dog case manager after previously being an adult dog foster coordinator at PACC. And I made the move in September of last year. And the goal of this program has always been to find happy, safe, suitable outcomes for our behavior dogs and help keep them sane while they're in shelter waiting for that perfect placement. So something that had really hit home when I was working as a dog foster coordinator was how invested our volunteers already are, how much they already know, love, and are championing these dogs every day. So my role kind of became, how do I support these amazing relationships that exist already to benefit our dogs further? So we'll talk about the process in this next slide. So the first step is identifying dogs for the program. And there are several ways that we do that. This is Christy and Acorn, the best girl in the whole world. But the qualifiers are, one, are they super long stay and maybe just need some extra marketing help? Two, do they have potentially garbage in-home notes that have made them a revolving door dog? Three, do they have garbage in shelter notes that present handling issues or raise some questions about what behavior away from the shelter might be? And four, are they in shelter decline? So if a dog checks one of these boxes, they're eligible for the program. And then if an advocate takes them on, they enter the program. This is Acorn. She has about 15 advocates. Megan is her official one, but we're all in love with Acorn. She's currently our longest stay and we all know her and she's the best dog in the world and we're gonna find her a perfect home. It's just gonna take a minute. So the second one, assigning an advocate. This is the easiest part of the whole thing because our volunteers freaking love our dogs, as you can see. Oftentimes a volunteer like Ursula will bring an urgent dog to my attention for the program, and they'll let me know they're happy to advocate for them in advance. And what advocating entails is being the first point of contact for interested parties and playing a big part in the counseling for them, helping their dogs with training plans targeted at specific behaviors they may be struggling with, or that will make it easier for them to find placement, marketing their dog and or providing me with marketing material to use for their dog, and then being present for meet and greets and being available for post-placement support. This is Penny and Jackrabbit, who just got adopted on the right, and that's Ursula and Racing on the left. So getting to know the dog and address their needs. Once a dog has been entered into the program, I comb through their chameleon notes, and I take stock of every volunteer entry and all of the behavior staff entries to just kind of come up with a plan of like, this is what I think these dogs probably need to work on to make it easier for them to find placement. For example, Miko here on the treadmill was brought to my attention by Ursula because he was declining in shelter. He's a classic case of the young puppy type who's just too smart with too much energy to be okay in a shelter setting. So the primary things he worked on with Ursula was exercise in any capacity he could get it. He played a lot of fetch, spent a lot of time on the treadmill, and was kind of a champion at it. Not every dog takes to the treadmill, but Miko and Apache is our other one, who are two treadmill champs. So any way he could get exercise out to help make his stay more comfortable. And then he worked a lot on impulse control and leash reactivity because he was way over threshold very often in the shelter. And then on the right, then we make adjustments as needed. I listen to the advocates when they tell me what their dog needs, because they know their dog better than anyone here. So I really just want to be that extra level of support to make sure their dog gets it. So this is a special locker of trazodone for Blazer. Blazer is one of Christy's boys who she found did much better handling wise when he got his trazodone at a certain time of day, and that's earlier. So instead of waiting for the clinic's med dispensation timetable to line up with when would be good for Blazer, she put out the ask, like, can the volunteers dispense this? We get here early in the morning, he'll get it earlier in the day, and then he'll have a much easier time with handling. If he gets trazodone at this hour, maybe he can be more present and focused when we work together. So, and this is an example of Blazer when he gets his trazodone at the right time with Christy.
The Kevin Leeser urban agility course.
So while we're watching this, I just want to make this connection. So he was on trazodone. Behavior team identified him for trazodone, and there was some improvement, but not consistent in around the times where volunteers were able to handle him. And so volunteers, probably Christy specifically, said, hey, can we take over the dispensing of this medication in benefit for the dog, as well as his, live outcome options? And the staff said, absolutely, and embraced the idea. Is that all correct?
That is correct.
So not only have you created a culture where volunteers are asked to help market and network and train and do all of those things, but they're also comfortable making specific requests when they know that's what's in the best interest of a unique dog. It's not really a question. It's just it's a statement. Like, to me, that really is amazing, and it speaks to a lot of the cultural work and the the bonds and trust that you guys are building there.
I don't know how to change weight. There we go. So, and Blazer's just a big happy puppy dog. I think once he finds placement, it's not going to be that difficult for him to settle in, but the real task with Blazer right now is just helping him stay sane while he's in the shelter, and that's what Christy's doing. Which brings us to marketing. This is so important not to neglect with your harder to place dogs. I mean, not with any dog, but especially your behavior dogs, because you have to cast a wide net in order to find their person. And you have to make sure you're putting their best foot forward in that marketing. I help with our urgent dog marketing efforts, but the vast majority of what we use to promote our dogs is volunteer or foster write-ups, information, photos, and videos. We also track where our adoptions come from, and for the bulk of our dogs, adopters saw them online first and fell in love with them. This is especially super important if you have dogs who you know aren't going to show well in the shelter setting. It's very hard to introduce someone to a dog they're hearing about for the first time in shelter and then just be like, no, I promise this isn't what they're actually like. They're actually a really good girl. So if you have a dog with barrier reactivity, especially, it's really important to capitalize on your marketing and online options as far as making them put their best foot forward and show well. So this is Trooper on the left. A lot of what I do is just copy pasting what their advocates have already put online. So Trooper's advocate, Caitlin, wrote this up after spending some time with them, took some really adorable photos, and I was like, great, I'm just gonna steal all that and put it on the main page. And he gets inquiries from this. Counseling and matchmaking, I wanted to use Mr. Max specifically so that I can include this middle photo of him rolling around on the asphalt like an angry potato. Counseling and matchmaking, this is obviously super important. But to kind of chronicle their journey together, without his best friend and advocate, Kelly, Mr. Max would probably almost guaranteed still be at the shelter. She's one of like 2 people he tolerates. And like, I'm not exaggerating when I use the word tolerate, like he enjoys her a large portion of the time, but sometimes it's just like, I guess you can touch me. So Mr. Max is currently on a trial adoption because an interested adopter messaged Kelly first, and she was able to express the behaviors she sees from him, but also put them into perspective. Like, this is a great dog, and I think this is why he shows these behaviors. He does well in this kind of setup, so we'd really like this for him. What I love about him is XYZ. Instead of maybe someone walks in, sees a Shar-Pei couch potato mix and thinks like, oh, that'd be a fun family dog, walks up to an adoption counselor who maybe doesn't know Mr. Max or hasn't handled Mr. Max. And then they read them all of Mr. Max's scary notes. And that adopter who was maybe a good fit says, oh, never mind, goodbye. Kelly was really able to just put everything into perspective. She knew the environment that Mr. Max would show well in. And so she conducted the meet and greet, and Mr. Max actually did really well with these interested parties. And then a week later, we spent an hour in the parking lot trying to con him into a vehicle to deliver him to his pre-adopter's house on the right. And there's his pre-adopter touching him on the head, and he doesn't hate it, and that's amazing. And that's thanks entirely to Kelly. Mr. Max doesn't even like me. I've touched him once, and he was distracted by something else. And then post-placement support. Having an established relationship with someone who knows the dog before they even take the dog home has been priceless for our fosters and adopters. Any form of post-placement support is awesome, but it can feel a little alien to contact a stranger about a dog you don't know, and a lot of people may just forego that entirely. So in connecting adopters with volunteers, it's a bit of a proactive lifeline instead of a, how about we wait until you reach a boiling point all by yourself and then bring this dog back. So this is Gail. She was an advocate for Hercules, now Hank, on the left. She's still in touch with their adopters, and they know if they need anything, they can reach out to her. If they just have general questions about his behavior, they can reach out to her. And she keeps us posted on what's going on with him. His adopters are obsessed with him. And then this is Rex on the right with his adopter. I forget his name. He's hilarious. This photo gave me a heart attack the first time I saw it. But Ursula was Rex's advocate. He rides in a backpack on that motorcycle, and apparently it goes well. But he's going to be moving to basically a plot of land with his adopter. And they're just kind of winging it right now. So Ursula was like, you need rattlesnake avoidance training. And so this is a photo that the trainer took of both of them when they showed up for that training. And just having Ursula there is that support and making that suggestion has been huge. So I'm going to kick it back over to Christy for a couple success stories. These are a couple of her boys we're going to talk about, Bender and Riley, who are now in happy, wonderful homes. You'll see from these videos that Christy has a type. But I'm going to play this one, and then I'm going to let Christy take it away.
Right. This is us making a sort of a demonstration video or training our other. We have certain handlers that are actually purple dot handlers for really tricky dogs that have special training, and so we try to help each other out once we figure out the best way to get the dog in and out safely. You can see Bender is the kennel closest to the door. He has to be muzzled to exit the kennel because he bites the leash so severely that he's going to snap and get somebody's arm or whatever. So we muzzle him, and we use 2 chain leashes. He overstimulated really easily. He came from a really bad situation with another dog that was like a domestic violence situation that was really bad. So we don't know really much about his history, but he was a very sweet dog when he wasn't losing his mind in the kennel, but he was really stressed in the kennel. He was given everything from Prozac to the best kennel, the quietest kennel, lots of time out of his kennel, but he still really, really struggled. So he came in, actually, and he was adopted at one point and came back. And after quite a long time, and he had just as much trouble the second time. So he was able to get into the program that didn't exist the first time he was here. And marketing, I'm not sure, how do we find his adopters?
I don't remember. I think it was probably Facebook though.
Yeah.
Because we were in touch with
very sweet dog when he wasn't losing it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I know you've been in touch with them post adoption.
Yeah, and they're doing well. They just asked me for his updated shot record, so I should be like, you can have this if you send me photos. Thanks. But yeah, and they were super, super great. I remember they reached out via email, and I remember I had like some of that, oh, you're very young bias in me, because like I super wasn't sure. And I know Christy, you were there. I think we just kind of counseled our butts off, like, no, you're super, super serious about this, right? But it's what, 8 months later, they're still doing well. I don't think they've had any problems, but I'm going to get that updated picture for next time.
Yeah, and I think, just goes to show there are adopters out there that are willing to adopt a dog that can't be walked without a muzzle. I mean, I'm always surprised when people are like, yeah, no, I'm willing to give this a shot. And he probably doesn't need the muzzle anymore, but he probably did for a while on going for walks. So.
Yeah, because it's really like, when you get down to it, it barely scratches the surface of who the dog actually is, and an adopter that can understand that is priceless. The negative behaviors don't define the dog. There's so much more than that. Oh, change. There we go. Okay, so this is Riley, and I'll just start playing this first one. He was here in December.
Yeah, I know it's cold because we're all wearing toques.
Yeah.
Yeah, Riley was, he came in with another male dog, and he was one of the top 3 most stressed out dogs I had ever experienced in the shelter, as far as handling him and getting him out of his kennel safely and to a place or a yard, or, in the beginning we couldn't walk him. He would just, you'll see in the video, had a very specific kennel routine to get him out safely. 2 handlers. We do that a lot with difficult dogs. We require 2 handlers so that they can't turn and redirect on you. So just getting him to the closest yard was like this for a little while, actually. And in the yard, he would overstimulate and he would bark at other, anyone outside the catch pen. Oh yeah, this is him in his kennel, just eating his kennel when he was by himself. He was put on various meds. He just could not deal with the shelter.
Right. And I think
he pantsed someone.
He what?
Once we finally started walking him, he was mostly getting better and better, and then he actually pantsed one of his walkers. He decided to go for his like fanny pack, and he was biting it, and he wouldn't let go, and then he got a hold of his pants, and the guy's pants fell down, and he was standing there in the park with his boxer shorts. Riley.
Buddy. Yeah, but yeah, I just want to say this video on the right, this kennel routine, there's a lot of dogs that wouldn't tolerate going into the kennel and being leashed up like that, but because Christine knows him so well, she knew, okay, this is actually the safest way that we can get this dog out. And so that was only possible because Christine knew him so well. She basically came up with his special routine and taught it to everyone. And then this video on the left, oftentimes we try to steer clear of like the Sarah McLachlan vibe of marketing a lot of the time when we can help it. But sometimes just showing the reality of what a shelter dog is living with makes all the difference. This video, I think Kelly took this video. Yeah, we put this video on Facebook and we're like, please God, someone please come save this dog. And he actually found an adopter in Oregon, and this next slide has, if it'll let me, oh, let's go. There we go. Okay, so I don't know if you want to say anything before I play this video. It's just him playing with Otto.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. But this is his life now. His horse of a brother. And something that was huge, Riley's playgroup notes were actually not great. So we were originally looking for like, maybe he needs to be an only dog, but a volunteer took him on a couple night overnight and tried him with her dogs. And he actually, by accident, did amazingly well with one of them who approached him off leash. But having that, and then we also reached out to his previous owners, and he lived with a Chihuahua and another large dog, his brother Phoenix. And so just that information together, the volunteer was able to find like what kind of dog he could possibly be compatible with. This wonderful adopter, Antonia, she reached out to us and just really wanted to save him. And she was game. She basically followed us through like this whole learning about Riley process. She would ask a question and we'd be like, I don't know, Barb, the volunteer who took him home, like, what do you think? Have you seen him in this behavior? And so it was just like a lot of back and forth. Here's his notes, we'll help you with X, Y, Z. And she loves the crap out of him, obviously, and he's doing well with his horse of a big brother, Otto.
And I'll say, like, I was really not game for sending him to another state. Because these dogs, they obviously grow on you. You're very invested in them. And he had questionable, he was getting into fights with his same size brother at home. His evaluation wasn't great, playgroup, sorry. And his behavior in the shelter, showed that he could get overstimulated really easily. So to me, that was just like a terrible idea, sending him across to multiple state lines to somebody who had other dogs. But I guess it really just kind of goes to show you continue that conversation and you start to get to know somebody and you realize that sometimes you might have to take a chance and you can have a really good outcome. So.
Yeah, and she's been one of my favorites, Antonia. She stays in touch with us all the time. She always sends us photo and video updates. She just did like a plant fundraiser for PACC. She's been awesome.
I do want to jump in here and let you guys know we have about 10 minutes left.
Okay, the next slide is just questions.
Oh, fantastic.
Hey.
What good timing. I really do applaud all of the work that you all are doing. And I know there's so many different ways that volunteers are participating and helping and expanding the life-saving efforts of the shelter. And I just it just means so much, I think, to municipal shelters and rescue groups and places that just aren't quite there. And to know that there's an organization that's doing this with volunteers, I think is just really inspiring. So thank you for sharing so much. I want to encourage anybody to ask questions in the chat, or feel free to unmute. We have some time for some Q&A, and there was a lot of information in here.
Let's see if I can find the chat. There it is.
So one of the things that I thought was really meaningful is this idea that the municipal shelter is not a rehabilitation center. And I know that's a really difficult discussion. Do you think there's maybe in like 1 or 2 sentences, you could share how you convey that message to volunteers?
That it's not a behavior rehabilitation center. I mean, I
Yeah,
don't
that
feel
the
like-
best place isn't within their care. You know, that makes sense.
Yeah, I feel like PACC volunteers get to see that every day in the dog handling. It's like, this dog is clearly over threshold and we can only do so much. I think, I'm not sure if that's something that we super need to emphasize anymore, but there may have been a point where it wasn't as clear cut. But Christy, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And it wasn't always 7 days, and it wasn't always consistent. And it was, you know, so when it came to like dogs getting put on deadlines and stuff, it took a long time for us to morph into what we are now. And in the beginning, there was a lot more of resistance from volunteers. You know, I definitely felt it, like all the pressure of, you know, you're putting all the pressure on me as a volunteer to save this dog. Sometimes these are dogs that we didn't even know that came in on a bite and go straight to, you know, straight to a deadline. But I think what's different is that over the years, we went from it's all on volunteers to now it's a group effort. Like, now we're going to give you the tools. Like, we didn't get the notes about the dogs before. We didn't see the redacted, you know, bite photos and notes, and we didn't have all of the information, and we didn't have anyone on the staff team also helping to reach out to rescues or work in, you know, in hopes of trying to find these animals homes that are safe for them. So I think the collaboration was a big part of that kind of acceptance. And as Rachel said, just seeing them fall apart in the shelter, you know, sure, yeah. Do I sometimes, would a few more days maybe get an animal a home? Yep, sometimes that has happened, and it's really heartbreaking to lose an animal.
There's another question about how large is your current foster program?
I think we've sent about 1,000 animals to foster at this point. The foster program's in a big state of flux right now. I'm not sure how we're restructuring things. We're at our peak, we had 4 foster coordinators. Right now we have 2, and we are still doing a lot of kitten diversion. And some of that has been outsourced to other departments. So sorry, that's not like a clear-cut answer, but we have about 1,000 animals in foster right now, or we've sent about 1,000 out this year.
And then there's a multi-tiered question here from Carolyn. Her shelter has a daily enrichment program, and a question has come up about whether or not volunteers should have animal handling experience in order to participate. Do you have thoughts on that?
So that first part, so a lot of enrichment is hands off. So I would say no. I'd like to hear more of Christy's thoughts on this, but for general enrichment, if you're just like filling Kong toys or spraying scents in the kennel area, I don't think you necessarily need animal handling experience for that. But I guess that would depend on your definition of enrichment. thoughts, Christy, on that?
Yeah, making enrichment, absolutely not. I mean, just the grunt work of stuffing Kongs, you know, it's a lot, you know, it's a lot of work and so no, that part doesn't require any animal handling at all. Handing out enrichment, maybe a little bit, you know, we just have specific rules in place. Like if dogs are sharing a kennel, they're not allowed to have toys or treats or, you know, that kind of enrichment. We have locks on our orange dot and higher colored dogs. So people cannot just randomly open a kennel and put a Kong in there. So in that sense, yeah, you'd want to, you know, again, we don't have anyone handling dogs outside of their dot color. And that means even opening the kennel for any reason. I think it's a really flexible thing.
And then the second half of this is we have some opportunities for new volunteers to work with mentors, but that's been put on hold due to the pandemic. And so what's your structure for pairing new volunteers with mentors?
I'll defer to Christy on that one.
Sure, yeah. So we actually had to hold off. We held off on onboarding new volunteers for up until recently, and that, you know, hurt. But we have started mentoring back up again. So we started the online classes once we were allowed to mentor again. So we're just careful about distance. Everyone in our shelter is masked. Everyone in our shelter, you know, is social distancing. So we just have our mentors trained to keep a 6-foot distance from their mentee and to always wear masks. And we've actually been, you know, really lucky. We've been pretty safe and we haven't had any issues. And now we're getting vaccinated, so many of us, so that's even better.
Fantastic. Well, unless there's any last questions, I want to thank you all for coming this afternoon or this evening, depending on where you are. Tomorrow we do have the top dog training volunteers from PIMA coming. Thursday evening, we have a fun and sparkly presentation from our friends at Gateway Pet Guardians about unicorn fosters.
Fun and sparkly.
Yeah, well, it's unicorn, so you know. Friday and Saturday are focused on cats. We've got 5 Acres Animal Shelter in Missouri talking about Jackson Galaxy cat positive clicker training for shy cats, and Saturday fostering for rock stars out of with the cat adoption team out of Oregon, where they have documented everything that you ever wanted if you're going to start a foster program, and you can take all of their job descriptions and processes and everything, fostering for rock stars. So thank you all for joining. Happy Volunteer Appreciation Week. Thank you, Christy and Rachel, for joining us and for all the lives that you're saving and providing inspiration to so many.
Thanks, man. It was awesome.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See ya.